copy, and then we're going to get started. So you should have your Coral Reef Biotic Gizmo Lab. Please make sure you are working through the right one. This is now looking at different living things and how it affects our ecosystem. And then you should also have the Gizmo Lab open. We are still working through coral reefs, so it's the same setup as when we did the abiotic factors, same tabs and variables that we can change, same species in the coral reef ecosystem as well. So you should be familiar with some of their information. So what we're going to be looking at today, you guys are going to work through the prior knowledge questions talking about how invasive species might affect ecosystems and what they could do. And then your Gizmo warm-up, you're going to look at the effect of fishing. So you're going to be changing more of the conditions this time to work through that. So what you need to do is on this conditions tab, you're going to go through and go to the fishing, and then you're going to set net fishing to 50%. So that's how much they are catching fish and how often. And then clicking advance year 10 times and kind of just observing what the coral reef looks like. Okay, and then making your observations from that. Then if you go, you'll click the data table and see what happens. You select every organism, what happens to all of that, okay? And what declines, what increases, things like that. Then remember to reset and restart all of your tabs. And then we're going to work through activity A. So you're going to look at fishing and how the different levels of fishing affect the ecosystem. The first thing you're going to do is look at the food that fish eat. I already filled in the yellowtail snapper and the Nassau grouper for you, specifically looking at those reef fish names that those organisms eat or prey on or attack, essentially. So what you're going to do is you're going to work through the questions. You're going to see what happens when there's an increase in groupers and see what happens to the snapper population. Then you'll return and restart and then look at the snappers and see what happens to the other organisms, and then also looking at what happens to the coral and the algae and the sponges and the sea urchins. Then what you're going to do is you're going to return to original settings and restart. And then you're going to look at the varying levels of net fishing to see which level the coral reef ecosystem could actually sustain and which ones would pretty much destroy the coral reef. So when you look at your results and you look at the data table and what you saw, like explain what happened to the fish or what happened to the coral. Did things disappear? Did something like bloom and overgrow or overpopulate the area? Things like that. Then we're going to move on to activity B, and you're going to look at how different diseases affect the ecosystem and those biotic factors. So you're going to work through the different disease tabs. So what you'll do is you'll go back to the conditions here, and then you're going to click disease. And you're going to go through the questions and observations and change which disease infection rates there are, and you're going to look at the organisms to see what it affects. Now, I did give you one question here already because it was kind of hard to see this disease happening, but this is what it is so you can notice it. Then what you'll do is in the end here, the question 7, you're going to change some other ocean conditions. So you'll have to go back to the ocean conditions tab and then set your parameters to what it says. Then you're going to go to the land use tab and set the agriculture to what it needs. Then you're going to go to the disease tab and change the infection rates. So this is going to be a coral reef that's under a lot of stress. it's not balanced, there's disease, and other factors affecting it. So you're going to answer those questions based on what you see. Okay, then you're going to obviously return to original settings and restart. And then you're going to look at what happens when sea urchins are affected by disease and how that changes your coral reef ecosystem. Then the last activity is activity C, and we're going to be looking at invasive species. So you'll go back to the conditions tab and click on invasive species, and then you're going to look at the two different types, so the red lionfish and then the crown of thorns starfish. So you'll work through those questions and summarize what you see happening when those invasive species come in. If you remember from the prior knowledge questions at the beginning here, invasive species are dangerous and harmful to ecosystems because when a new species comes in, there's really no predators to kind of help keep it in check and fight it off or eat it or attack it. So the invasive species is kind of like king of the hill and can just take over and rule everything. But then that obviously affects all of the natural organisms that are in that area. So you're going to look at what happens with those two different invasive species and answer your few questions, and then that's it. So again, this is a longer gizmo. So you guys have today to start it, and then you're going to be working on it tomorrow as well. If you get it done, please make sure you submit your gizmo. If you have any questions along the way, please email me and I'll help you work through them. Otherwise, make sure you're reading through the directions and going through those steps, and you should be able to answer the question. Have a good Monday.